that are using Ripple products. And one thing that I've always looked into is just the big players, right? Like the big banks, the biggest financial institutional players. And one thing is very clear. The big question that comes up is, why aren't institutional players using XRP at scale right now? Why don't we have big banks like Bank of America utilizing XRP? If Ripple is so efficient and if XRP is so efficient, why aren't we seeing adoption at scale happening right now? Well, in this video, I want to go over that because, again, we have case studies where these players are leveraging Ripple. They're utilizing specific things like Ripple payments or custody. But what about XRP, right? Like, where is the XRP use case value here? So let's go over a few things. Number one, let's talk about the big banks. So there's a lot of articles like this. This one was updated back in July of this year. This was 12 banks using XRP. Now in this, we have SBI, Santander, PNC Bank, American Express, Standard Chartered, MUFG Bank, CIBC, Kotak Mahindra Bank. We also have BTEC, Instarem, Rack Bank, and CM Commercial Bank. Again, if we're looking at this, we have that, SBI Remit is using XRP and Ripple's on-demand liquidity solution. Or down here, this is Santander, they're using RippleNet and XRP. Like, all of this sounds great on paper, but like, where is the use case value? Where is that major significant use? I would argue that almost none of these players are using XRP, or at least using it at scale. And the question goes, why isn't that happening right now? Why aren't we seeing it? What's the biggest issue? Is it the Ripple SEC case? Well, no, absolutely not, because the case is done. That wrapped up back in the beginning of August. All right, well, if it's not the case, what else could it be? Because we know that big banks have been working with Ripple since going all the way back 7+ years ago. Here's another list 7 years ago. Now, this includes some of those banks that we just mentioned, but a ton of additional banks. And yes, at some point in time, there was a list on Ripple's website where you can cite all of these big banks. But again, even then, years back, the question was, why aren't we seeing XRP's price going absolutely parabolic, and we're seeing XRP going to, X amount of dollars? Because again, if all of these banks are using it, obviously the demand is going to be so significant where the supply starts to, become a question of, are we about to see a supply shock or not? And that should push the price to crazy highs, right? Well, again, it comes back to the question of, are these big banks using it? Even over here, I have an updated list of all of the banks that we pulled from Medico, as well as a few of the recent acquisitions. It's a substantial list. We also have those NDAs. We have a lot of additional announcements, like, for an example, this one with DBS Bank and Franklin Templeton. Now, this one, we are starting to see use cases around XRP becoming a reality. So, after wrapping up this case, which was the beginning of August, we're now starting to see a few updates. This one is with DBS Bank. DBS Bank is a giant. We've talked about them before. And this was repo markets powered by tokenized collateral and stablecoins. This is going to be tokenized on the XRP ledger. This is SG Benji. And it's also going to be listed on DBS's digital exchange, earning yield and opening new liquidity venues. All right, well, cool. Great use case, right? But this is still just the beginning of a use case. So we still have to wait for it to scale. What about all of the banks that have been building around Ripple for years and years now, right? Now we also have another recent one, BBVA. This is another big one. This one was around custody. Now, we already know that custody also involves tokenization. Again, we already know that Ripple has been pushing the XRP ledger around tokenization use cases. So this could definitely be, with XRP tapped in a big way. We still won't see that at scale just yet because it's just beginning. Or even RLUSD with BNY, Global, aka BNY Mellon. This is another great use case. This is just around custody though. So what about XRP? What's holding XRP back from being adopted at scale? Because we already have so many big players that are confirmed being, tapped in with Ripple already. Ripple customers or Ripple employees told us that their customer list spans like 500 plus entities. So we wonder, why isn't XRP's price going parabolic? Why aren't we seeing, a tremendous amount of XRP being tapped in and utilized? What's the big deal here? Well, I would argue, because again, we already started to see the ease from the announcement of the SEC case, getting wrapped up. We started to see more announcements like this and very similar to this since that announcement. And even going back to, I think it was like March, when Ripple said that they're dropping it was like a piece of the SEC case that they're basically saying, all right, well, we're done pursuing this. From that point on, we started to see more acquisitions. We started to see a little bit more expansion around XRP. So you could definitely see the impact that this did have. Now, if we're thinking about that, this is not full-on clarity for crypto. This is clarity for XRP, yeah, sure, but crypto is still unregulated. So we think about what's been happening around crypto. For an example, back in July, Brad Garlinghouse did speak at a Senate banking committee for digital asset market structure. He said, "I urge you to prioritize the passage of market structure legislation for digital assets to ensure the US becomes the crypto capital of the world." Listen closely.
Speaking on behalf of the crypto industry, I urge you to prioritize the passage of market structure legislation for digital assets through this committee and the full Senate, to provide the rules and regulations needed to ensure that the US becomes the crypto capital of the world. Once market structure legislation for digital assets becomes law in the United States, this will catalyze a new era of US competitiveness and unlock efficiencies in financial transactions, dramatically helping consumers and businesses alike. Ripple hopes to see this become a reality, and we look forward to working with you to help make this happen.
Now, we already know that Ripple has been embracing regulations forever. In fact, they have been talking about regulations. They've been addressing regulations and how it unlocks this market in a huge way. Again, Ripple has been prepared for regulation since day one. Now, we also know, and I'm not going to play this video clip because you guys already know about this video clip, but we also know that with them pursuing a banking charter license plus the FedMaster account, Brad Garlinghouse again on CNBC said that we're not anti-regulation, we want in the right way. Now, again, how do they get in? Well, they get in through going through this process, and also with market structure legislation. We already know that we got the Genius Act. Jack McDonald from Ripple said, with the signing of the Genius Act, we're seeing more consumer companies, retailers, platforms, and tech firms explore whether they need their own stablecoin. This is so important to focus on. Why? Well, because this was one of those big legislative moves happening this year. And once it got passed, we saw this. A massive inflow of players launching their own stablecoins, tapping into the stablecoin market in a big way. Again, if we're thinking about this, what's the next phase of legislation? Why is XRP not being adopted at scale? Why is XRP not being utilized at scale? Because crypto is unregulated. So we look at the market structure bill. U.S. Financial Services Committee, the Ethereum and crypto market structure bill will pass by the end of the year. Check this out.
Exactly right. We passed in the House in July the Clarity Act, which got 78 Democratic votes, meaning we had a strong bipartisan vote over the suspension of vote level in the House, meaning more than 290 members came together to vote for the Clarity Act, which is that market framework which will make America the most competitive digital asset nation in the world when you combine it with the Genius Act that President Trump signed into law in July, which is the dollar-backed payment stablecoin legislation.
And you are somewhat gratified with what the Trump administration has done. There's been some progress, obviously, with the Genius Act, but what I didn't realize was how more advanced, is that the right word, for crypto use in the economy is in South America. And we maybe even in Europe. maybe even in Europe in terms of legislation, where we're definitely ahead with liquidity and we've had some good IPOs, but we're lagging without this this structure in place.
That's right. We can't be competitive and lead the nation in fintech if we don't have this market framework. I told President Trump back in July that if you sign the Genius Act and you pass it, it's like passing a bill that authorizes the use of a cell phone, but you have no cell towers. You don't have the rules for custody, for dealing, for exchanging, for serving as a trader, for how you're going to actually operate a blockchain network inside the financial services industry. So we need both. They're both essential. And as you point out, the Senate is now considering the Clarity Act under Tim Scott's leadership in the Banking Committee and John Bozeman's leadership in the House of the Senate Ag Committee. And we hope that they will take prompt action on that this fall during the October and November timeframe. I'd love to see the Clarity Act pass the Senate before the end of the year.
So yeah, listen, when we think about legislation around crypto and that big moment, this is that big bill. If we're thinking about why these utility-based projects are still not being tapped in, still not being utilized at scale, still not, having these big banks, saying, all right, well, that's it. We want to utilize X and Y and Z. And you could, fit in any utility-based network to any of those, you could say Hedera, you could say XRP, you could say Algorand. The biggest thing to understand with any utility-based project, in order to be adopted, in order to be utilized by these big banks that Ripple has been partnered up with for XRP, for an example, right? We still need crypto clarity. We still need this space to be fully regulated. It doesn't matter that XRP is now cleared from the SEC case. This was definitely a big issue, but this does not fully unlock XRP to be adopted at scale from big banks and being utilized. Regulations around crypto is. That's why we go over here as well to $88 billion Coinbase CEO just said Bitcoin crypto market structure bill is about to pass very soon. I've never been more bullish. Almost everyone is now expecting this bill to pass very soon. This bill will be that key. If we're thinking about the moment where XRP starts to fully be embraced, this is it. Because again, just like Brad Garlinghouse told us over here, in order to ensure that the US becomes the crypto capital of the world, we need to pass this bill. Because what does this bill do? It unlocks innovation. It unlocks these big players to tap in and utilize these technologies. Go and look up online, why haven't institutional players embraced crypto yet? I guarantee you that one of the biggest obstacles for them to tap into this technology is regulations. This is why XRP also hasn't been adopted and utilized at scale the way that we have been talking about it, being so, right? Because again, we've always said that at some point in time, yes, XRP will be utilized at scale. Utility will be the main value driver, but we are not there yet. And I want you guys to understand that this gets us there. So although, yes, we have been talking about it, we've been addressing it, we've been looking at all of the puzzle pieces falling into place, it's all preparing us for this moment where we finally get this passed. But listen close to this video as well. This is Brian Armstrong from Coinbase.
One more piece of legislation that, as you said, got bipartisan support in the House already and now is being debated in the Senate. And this is what we call market structure legislation, which just simply means it's covering all of the non-stablecoin crypto assets, things like Bitcoin and Ethereum. And it's resolving some of these outstanding issues from the last administration that got weaponized by people like Gary Gensler trying to go after the crypto industry because it wasn't clear, were these a commodity, were they a security? So this legislation is making great progress. I've never been more bullish on the chances to get it passed into law. This freight train has left the station, and there's people on both sides of the aisle in the Senate that are eager to get this legislation put on the books. Now, this hasn't stopped the big bank lobby from coming in trying to throw a wrench into things. They actually want to go in and ban rewards on stablecoins, and that was already settled in the prior Genius Act that I just mentioned. But I'm not too worried about it. The senators we spoke to aren't really going to entertain reopening that issue. And so hopefully this legislation gets passed into law very soon.
Well, listen, this is one of the rare
So yeah, I mean, listen, when we think about this, this is that big moment for crypto. This is the one thing that we have been waiting on patiently. I truly do think that this is going to be the moment where utility-based altcoins finally get unlocked and unleashed in a huge way. We're talking about institutional players, enterprise players. This is that moment. So if we're thinking about and wondering why hasn't XRP been adopted? Why hasn't XRP been utilized by these big players that we've been hearing about for years? Regulations. That's the number one reason why.